Hey fam, welcome back. In today's video, I am so excited. This video has been a long time coming. It's probably my most highly requested video ever, and that is to go over my eyeshadow palette collection with y'all. So today, I'm gonna be going through each and every palette in my collection. I do have a fairly large collection, but it is full of palettes I absolutely love. I love playing with color, I love neutral palettes as well, and they're all gonna be in today's video. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and stay tuned. We're gonna get into it right now. Okay, so I have a bajillion palettes to go over. I figured we would organize them by brand and then kind of do them alphabetically. Not like perfectly alphabetically, but just like all the A's together, all the B's together. I don't care like, you know, B-A, B-E, B-I. I'm not getting too crazy with it, but let's go ahead and start here. So we'll start with Alamar. From Alamar, I have 3 palettes. I have the Spanglish palette. This is a really pretty pinky purple palette. There are some pretty duochromes in here as well. We have a lot to get through, so let's move on. We've got the Alamar Cosmetics Reina del Caribe Volume 1 palette. This one is beautiful. And we have the Alamar Cosmetics Reina del Caribe Volume 2 palette, also very beautiful. I really like the shimmer formula and the mattes in these palettes. Next, I have a few palettes from Ace Beaute. The first is the Vintage Dawn palette. It's just a really pretty, I think, fall color story. It's got a little bit of like summery tones in it, but mostly fall. We have the Ace Beaute Flair palette, which is a new palette in my collection. This one has fall tones and summer tones. It's just really pretty. I picked this up because I heard Bean always raving about it and I really want to try it. We also have the Ace Beaute Oceanic palette, which is absolutely one of my favorite color stories from the brand. I cannot wait to play with this one. And lastly, we have the Ace Beaute Nostalgia palette. Also a really pretty color story, very summery. Really cute theme too. And then last but not least, we have Anastasia Beverly Hills. First, I have the Soft Glam palette. Mine is a little dirty, but really pretty color story, very neutral, very work appropriate. And just a really easy to use palette, a really nice formula. Next we have Modern Renaissance. It's a really pretty warm tone palette. Classic. Sultry is definitely one of my favorite Anastasia palettes. This is a pretty cool tone palette, some neutrals. Beautiful formula. Subculture, which is a beautiful fall color story. We have the Alyssa Edwards palette, which is definitely one of my favorites. A lot of people say that they don't use this one enough, but if you have this, I recommend it. I recommend using it. The mattes are super pigmented. The shimmers are really beautiful. It's a great palette. We have the Jackie Aina palette, which is also really beautiful. This definitely has like a holiday feel to me. Like it reminds me of like Thanksgiving to Christmas time. Just a really pretty color story with beautiful shimmers. We've got the Carly Bible palette, which is also really beautiful. Some fun textures, really easy to wear shades for my skin tone. We have the Norvina palette, which is also really pretty. And then last we have my ABH Norvina Collection palette. I have not used this one yet. Still kind of deciding this one's fate, but eventually I'll probably play with it. So this is the Norvina palette. This is Volume 1. This shade looks really pretty to me. We'll see. Next, let's talk about some B's. First, let's talk about Becca. I have this one, which is the Ombre Rouge Eye Palette. This is like a really pretty warm neutral palette. It's very easy to use, just all matte, kind of like the Dose of Colors palettes, but a really pretty formula. And I also have the Volcano Goddess palette from Becca. This one's a really pretty cool tone palette. You've got some neutrals and then you've got some really cool special shades. These shimmers are really beautiful, very easy to work with, and I really enjoy this palette. I also have one from Bobbi Brown. This is just a really simple little, you know, everyday work kind of palette. This is the Evening Glow eyeshadow palette. This is the only palette I have from Bobbi Brown, so even though it's kind of neutral and sort of everyday, I like to have it because I like the packaging and I like the formula. I also have this one from Bare Minerals. This is the Gen Nude Latte palette. This formula is really gorgeous. The shimmers are very impactful. The mattes are super buttery and blendable. It's a really beautiful palette. I also have one from Beauty Bakery. This is the Breakfast in Bed palette. This one I have never used. I keep deciding whether I want to put this in a giveaway or not, so I just haven't touched it yet. It's really pretty, but I feel like I have a lot of mauve tones and this one's untouched. My drawers are really full, so I don't know what we're gonna do with this one. We're gonna think about it. Then I have a Butter London palette. This is the Teddy Boy palette. This color story is gorgeous. However, the formula is a little lackluster for me. I didn't think it blended very well and it wasn't very impactful. They're just kind of sort of weak shades. I mean, it's like kind of like satins. There's not really a whole lot of wow in this palette, but it is a really pretty color story and it's pretty unique to my collection, but I never reach for it because I'm not in love with the formula. So we'll see about this palette too. I'm not decluttering anything in this video. I'm just going over my collection with y'all, but just making mental notes for myself. So next we have the Blush Tribe palette. This is the Hasina 2. This is a really pretty palette. It's like greens and purples and blues. I definitely want to try this formula out, but I really love the color story. Next I have this one from BoxyCharm. This is the Hello Charmer palette. This I thought was really pretty with all these cool textures. I really love this full size. It's a really pretty shimmer, and this is a pretty glitter. But these are some really beautiful shades. I just love this palette. I think it's so pretty. This is definitely a companion palette for me. I don't reach into this all by itself, but I reach into it for certain shades. Also, one of the newest palettes to my collection is the Wilderness palette from Beauty Bay. This one I love. This is so pretty. I feel like I could just have this palette for like a month and still not be bored with it and just like use this every single day. It is so pretty. I really, really like this one. It's a good formula. I do find that the mattes can sort of blend away if you blend them too much, but they're still really pretty and pigmented, and I love the shimmers. Then we have two from B Bella Cosmetics. This is an affordable brand. I think these palettes are around like $12. So the Shades of Roses palettes is a really pretty romantic, kind of like Valentine's Day theme palette. It does have a pressed glitter in it, but it has a really pretty formula and the mattes perform pretty well too. I do have a video on this on my channel. It's a nice palette. And then this is the newest palette to my collection. This is the B Bella Life in Pastel palette. It's really cute packaging. I think it's adorable. And then these are the shades. I think they're beautiful. I think this is probably a pressed glitter, but these look like shimmers and the mattes look really nice. Just a really pretty color story. I like that it's got a little bit deeper tones mixed in with the lighter pastels. I think this is such a pretty and unique color story, and it looks so cheerful and happy. I can't wait to play with this one. And then we have my BH Cosmetics palettes. We have Trendy in Tokyo, and I think they've repackaged these, but I have the old packaging, and this is just a pretty colorful rainbow palette. It's got some neons, and I think it's a nice summer palette. Then we have the Sweet Shop Pistachio palette. This is beautiful. I just have two of the Sweet Shops. I have this one and I have Cotton Candy, which is like the purpley pink one. These are both really fun, great quality. I have the Aurora Lights palette from BH. This one is like baked shadows. There's different textures. Some are a little bit more satin, some are a little bit more like toppery. This would be like the closest to a matte, even though they're all shimmers, but it's like toppers, metallics, and like satins. So it's a pretty cool palette. I love the color story. Then we have a beloved palette from BH Cosmetics. This is the Desert Oasis palette. This is such a great palette if you were just starting your makeup collection, you go into an office every day for work, and you just want something that is going to be affordable, impactful, beautiful. This palette is gorgeous. You do have highlighter shades over here, but I use them all as eyeshadows, as shimmers. This one is my favorite. It's so pretty. You've got some colorful options in here. You've got this kind of like blue-brown duochrome. You've got a pretty blue here. But then you've got really easy to wear mattes, really pretty shimmers if you want to do something more light. I mean, this is just such a versatile palette. I think it's so pretty. And I just love this. It's just a workhorse. Next, we have this Carly Bible Deluxe Edition palette. This was her first collab with BH. I just hold on to this honestly for nostalgia because I really like Carly Bible, and these are some really pretty colors for work. These highlighters are really pretty as well and super impactful, and I really like it, even though I don't reach for this enough for sure. And it's so big it kind of stays trapped at the bottom of my drawer. I probably would use it a little bit more, but these are such beautiful shades. They still perform beautifully. I love BH. Then we have my two Zodiac palettes from BH. We have the Love Signs, and this one has some baked shadows and some mattes. It's got a pretty highlighter in the center, just a beautiful color story. I I definitely need to reach for these more. And I have the BH, I guess regular old Zodiac. This one doesn't have anything specific on it. This one's a little bit more cool toned. Some mattes and shimmers, super beautiful. Okay, so next we have all of the C's, which is essentially like ColourPop and Friends. So first I have this empty magnetic palette, which has a lot of ColourPop singles in it. There are some other singles from other brands, but like all these little pans you see plus that one are all ColourPop. So this is mostly ColourPop. And it's just a little palette I made myself. Then we have a bunch of their 9-pan shadows. This is the Smoke Show. Pretty cool tone, gray and black and white palette. Love that one. We have Going Coconuts, which I kind of did myself. I took out 2 of the warmer shades and added in 2 cooler tone shades from another palette. I think from the Flutterby or Making Mauves or something. So this is my own version of the coconut palette that's a little bit cooler toned. And then Making Mauves has just some extra neutral shades in it. This is like my own little Making Mauves. I just threw in like some extra shadows when I was redoing some of my palettes. I have Lilac You a Lot, which I believe, yeah, these are just some extra purples. We've In a Trance. This one I did not mess with. So that's what it looks like. It's like a pretty pastel palette. I have a video using that on my channel. Blue Moon. Also have a video on this one though. It's probably fugly. Sorry. Learning, growing. This is a pretty blue palette. We've got Aura and Out, which is also the pastel collection. These had some pretty mints and chartreusey greens. Honey palette is their yellow palette. Beautiful. Aren't You Glad is another gorgeous one. Just so citrusy and bright and pretty. Main Squeeze was their first red palette. I think they've come out with some better red ones since then, but this is the one I have. Don't use this one a lot, but I hang on to these because of like making palettes and such. It's great that they're easily removable. And here's the green one. This is Just My Luck. Then we have California Love, which I think is beautiful. It's a little bit more warm than I typically wear, but when I played with this before, I've loved the looks I've done. I just think this is a really, really pretty palette. X's and O's I think is another standout. I don't buy a ton from ColourPop, so the ones that I have I think really are beautiful. This one has a really pretty wine tone in it. This is like my favorite shade in the whole palette, that deep red. Some pretty shimmers. And then we have the Good as Gold palette, which is very gold, obviously, and very beautiful. I love the formula in here. We have Dream Street from Kathleen Lights. I've never used this palette, but I really like the coral and these 2 kind of tealy blue shades. But I was a little annoyed that both of these were selected for this palette. These are like pretty much the same shade twice. I mean, maybe one's a little bit different, but I mean, I can't really, is it like the slightest difference ever on planet Earth? I don't know, but it's fine. I also have the Zodiac palette, which I love the packaging. Color Story, I get where Kathleen was going with it. I love that she did colors inspired by the actual signs, but it's not a palette I reach for very often because it just doesn't do much for me. These shades are kind of a little bit dry. Again, ColourPop is not my favorite formula. I think it's a nice affordable option, but I think there are affordable eyeshadow palettes that I think have a way better formula than ColourPop, personally. No shade, just personal preference. We have the Sweet Talk palette, which is a really pretty peach tone palette. Love that packaging. Definite favorite for me is the Double Entendre. This is a great travel palette. It's sturdy, it's easy to work with, it's beautiful. We have the Yes Please, which mine is filthy. These are some warm tone palettes. I think this was meant to dupe the Natasha Denona Sunset palette, I think. We have the Rendezvous, which was the first ColourPop palette that I bought. I think this was like an Ulta exclusive. There are some interesting tones in here, which is why I've hung on to it, but this is not a palette I reach for all the time. I typically only go in to make this like one little pink look, and that's basically it. And I do have a video on this one as well. And then we have the Flutterby, which I made myself out of the Lilac You a Lot, My Pleasure, and Ooh La La palettes. So that's my own little pinky purple. We have the Misunderstood palette, which was the collaboration with Disney Villains. I think this one is really beautiful. Probably my favorite ColourPop palette. And then we have Truly Madly Deeply, which I don't use very often. It's fine. It's a pretty palette, but yeah. And then believe it or not, I do have some C brands that or not ColourPop. First, I have this quad from Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Rebel Luxury Palette. I think this is the same as like Green Lights. She just renamed it. Really pretty. I have a Chanel quad. This is Warm Memories. It's a really pretty little rosy kind of romantic quad from Chanel. I also have the Copacetic Cosmetics Butterfly Kisses palette. This is like a cool tone purple palette, really pretty. I have one from Ciate London. This is the Editor palette. And I think this is really pretty as well. I like the tones in here and I like how much variety you have in this palette. And then I have one palette from Cargo. This is the Namaste in India palette. I have hung on to this for so long. I really need to use it more. I'm sorry that this is like not picking up the best because of this reflective packaging. I turned down the lights a little bit so you can maybe see it a little bit better. It's definitely hard to capture because of this packaging, but it's mostly a neutral palette with some pops of green, but it's really pretty and I like the formula. I just keep hanging on to it, even though I never use it. Mattes feel a little dry, but they're pretty pigmented. It feels like a nice formula. So next we have our D's, and my table is getting filthy, but that's okay. First we have this one from Dior. This is the Golden Nights palette. I thought this one was such a pretty color story. I know Robert Walsh just recently did a video on this palette and he hated it, but that's okay. I think it's so pretty. I also have two from Dominique Cosmetics. I have the Celestial Thunder, which was a BoxyCharm exclusive. It's the Celestial Storm palette, but like missing 4 shades. But this one was pretty. It's a fun color story. And then we have the Dominique Cosmetics Latte 1 palette, which is for sure one of my favorite neutral palettes. The formula in here is so pretty. I bought this because my girl A, it's Amanda, loved it so much, and she totally convinced me to buy it. No regrets. And then I have a couple palettes from Dose of Colors. The first is the Blushing Berries palette. This is a really pretty, like Merlot-y wine, warm tone, beautiful berry palette. We've got the Marvelous Mauves, which I also think is really beautiful. Some great mauve mattes. These are all matte palettes. And we have the Sassy Siennas, which is like a beautiful, bright, warm tone palette. Even though I'm definitely more of a shimmer than a matte girl, I think the formula in these is so nice. Gives me an excuse to pull out some of my pigments and single shadows, and I think these are so beautiful. I also have the Dose of Colors Desi and Katie Francation palette, which is really pretty. I love these special shimmers, and I love the shimmers in this palette so much, sorry for the reflective packaging, that I bought a lot of these individual shades from Boxy Pop-Up. I think they're so pretty. Not these specific shades, but this formula in their singles. I think they were like $20 retail, but I don't think they sold very well, so Boxy got them. Woohoo! And I really like them. I think they're a beautiful formula. This is definitely like the one I reach for the most. But you've got like this beautiful green. It's like black, blue. Like they're just so pretty. And then my last one is the Hidden Treasures palette. This is another one I've considered decluttering. It's really pretty. I just never reach for it. But I also haven't been going back into the office yet, and I do know that they're planning on bringing us back in. So I don't know. I don't want to declutter a great formula and a great palette that I might be able to use for work every day. But I just need to reach for this one more. Next for E, we have e.l.f. We've got the Velvet Touch eyeshadow, and this is in Island Breeze. So this is the more warm toned palette of the two. It's got some really pretty cream shadows, and I've had these for years and they're still like just as buttery and creamy as they were. I love the Chartreuse green. They're just really a cool formula. I wish they would bring these back. This one is in Cool Mist, and this is my favorite of the two. This one's cooler tone. It's got a lot of pretty blues in it. Brought this with me to Mexico. I just thought it was so beautiful, and I love this one. This shade with the Becca Cosmetics. Just kind of show you what I'm talking about. So they're like a really pretty, like more moisturizing than their putty formula, but just a really pretty eyeshadow base. Really pretty colors. I mean, I just love these. I think they're so nice. I don't know why they discontinued them. I don't know if they just came out at the wrong time before creams were so popular, but I bet if they brought these back out, they would be very popular. I also have one of their bite-sized palettes, and I know like everyone was like in love with these things. I was okay with it. This is not my favorite formula. It's okay though. Like I made a pretty look that I liked with this palette. I thought it was easy to use, but yeah, I wasn't as like gung-ho crazy head over heels into these palettes as so many other people were for some reason. And then the e.l.f. Earth and Ocean has been a favorite of mine for a long time. It's just such a good palette. I just recently did a look with this one as well. For the letter F, we have 3 palettes. First, we have the Flower Jungle Lights palette, which is an absolute favorite of mine. These are beautiful. I just have to swatch a couple of these for y'all. I mean, what the actual heck? So pretty. This palette is definitely such a standout in my collection. I love it so much. And then we have 2 from Fenty. We have a Fenty Snap Shadow. This is number 7 in Cadet, I think, yeah. There we go. This is a really pretty little color story. I've never used this palette, but I really wanted to try these guys, and this was the one that appealed to me the most. I just haven't gotten around to reaching for it yet. I'm not as into small palettes as a lot of other people are. I just find that I like want to create the same look over and over again, so I don't often pull for them unless I have like a specific look in mind and I specifically want to use it. But I do want to get some use out of this and see what I think about it. They didn't get the best reviews. And then we have the Fenty Beauty Moroccan Spice palette. This is another really pretty palette. I just need to use it more. I need to use all of these more. So next we have G, which is a very fun category. These are absolutely some of my favorite brands. So starting with Glam Light, I have the Miracle palette, and this one is beautiful because it was designed to, I think, bring awareness and support to breast cancer and survivors. This is a really pretty purpley pink palette. It's got some nice corals and peaches, and this is just a really pretty formula. I really love Glam Light's metallics. I also have the Donut palette from Glam Light, and I just keep them all in their packaging because I find they're a little bit easier to store that way, but this is the Donut palette. Very pretty. It's got like a little poofy packaging. We have the Michaela palette, which is my newest Glam Light palette. I love this one. This is another one like the Beauty Bay palette that I feel like I could just have this one maybe in the Beauty Bay because this would have a lot of the purples and I would be happy. Like just these 2 palettes. I also have the Cake palette from Glam Light. This one is a really pretty rainbow palette. Lots of gorgeous tones. And then lastly, we have the Ice Cream palette. And this one has some pretty colorful pastels, gorgeous shimmers. I love these palettes so much. And then another favorite G brand would be Give Me Glow. I have the Juicy Olive palette, which was the first one I bought from this brand. I like stalked this palette for like a year before I could finally get it. So pretty. I love olive tones, especially on my skin. I think they look really flattering. I have the Vintage Rose, which is also really beautiful. Some more of those olivey tones, and I love the mixture of these cranberries and pinks. Such a pretty palette. I have Christmas Morning, which is very fun and festive for the holidays. My newest Give Me Glow palette is Pastel Dreams. This one's really pretty, mattes and shimmers, pastel tones. And then we have the Vivid Rose, which is like the Vintage Rose turned up, a little bit more purpley and pink, but very pretty. For H, we have 2 palettes from Hip Dot. This first one is the Zion palette. This one is like pinks and purples, some warm tones, very pretty. I've never used this one, but it's beautiful. And then we have the See No Taste palette, which I love. I brought this to Mexico with me. It's very pretty, greens and blues, nice shimmers. It's really pretty palette, and I love the packaging. And I love that Hip Dot does so many fun themes. I know this one is the cenotes in Mexico. This one is Utah Sandstone Caves. So like, I love that she's getting inspiration from nature. I think that's so neat. Yo, I cannot believe I forgot Miss Huda Beauty for H. We have a lot more H's than just Hip Dot. I have the Pastel Lilacs palette. This has got pretty light purples. I've got the Orange Neon palette, which I think is really pretty. Then I have all 3 of the nude palettes. I have Nude Light, beautiful, Nude Medium, also beautiful, and Nude Rich, probably the prettiest of all 3. And then I have the Obsessions palettes. I have my favorite Obsession, which is the Smoky Obsessions. My black did arrive shattered from Sephora, but it's okay. I also have Topaz Obsessions. It's a really pretty warm tone, beautiful shimmers. I have the Huda Emerald Obsessions, really pretty greens. I have the Sapphire Obsessions, beautiful blues and a really pretty chartreuse, pretty teals, just a gorgeous color story. And then I have Amethyst Obsessions as well, which is beautiful purples and pinks, are more like warm toned pinks. So if you didn't get the Menagerie Flight Club palette, I pretty much think this palette is very similar in tone, at least. And then I have the Huda New Nudes, which is this beautiful palette. Lots of pretty mauves. And I also have the Huda Mercury Retrograde, which is beautiful. Some pretty pastels, very colorful and very pretty packaging. For eye, we have Iconic London. I have this one, which is I think like the Data Slay. I was thinking Daydreamer for some reason. The Data Slay palette from Iconic London. This is a really pretty, again, like a workhorse type palette. The shimmers in here are really beautiful, and the mattes are really pretty as well. I definitely don't use this one enough because again, it's big, so it gets a little bit buried. But very pretty shimmers. I love the texture of the shimmers. They're really buttery and soft. This is a beautiful palette. To me, it looks like super bridal. Like it would be like the perfect palette if you were getting married. You have like a ton of options. If this was good for your skin tone, of course. Like if these mattes would work for you, I think it would be beautiful. And then also from Iconic London, I have this. It's like a pigment thingamabobber. It's a little messy, but each of these has like a little loose glitter pigment in it. And they're pretty cool. You can see just how like shimmery that is. So these would be more like toppers or highlighters, but they're just gorge. I love this so much. I like bought it for full price back when I would only ever buy things on sale. So I'm like, if I spent like 60 something bucks on this thing, I need to actually get some use out of it. It's super pretty. Next for J, we have a Juvia's Place. First I have the Nubian by Juvia's. It's like a little mini palette. It's like a nice little warm travel palette. This is another one I don't reach for enough. Probably on the chopping block a bit. And same with this one, the Violets by Juvia's. This is a really pretty cool tone palette, but I don't know how much I really love this. The shimmers are like a little bit hard pressed. The mattes are a little bit hard pressed. But I mean, they're pretty. But you see what I mean? Like they're just not the easiest mattes to work with. The shimmers are nice, but I have a lot of purple palettes. So this one is another one I'm kind of thinking about. This one I love. This is the Nomad by Juvia's. This color story is like right up my alley. It's like the most beautiful fall palette. I love this one. I also love the Douce palette from Juvia's. This is so pretty. I really like playing with this palette. I stick more to like the pinks and the greens and the silvers. I don't play as much with these neutral tones, but the colorful shades in this palette I think are really pretty. I also really like the Zulu by Juvia's. This is a really pretty rainbow palette. I definitely played with this a couple times on my channel for different looks. And I also love pairing it with the Warrior palette, which has some other beautiful rainbow tones. A lot more mattes in this palette. And then the Warrior 1 was my first Juvia's Place palette that I ever bought. I thought this was such a beautiful color story, but I just have so many neutral palettes and I don't find Juvia's mattes to be the easiest to work with. You really just kind of have to pack them and then blend them, which is fine. I do that with a lot of my colorful shades, but neutrals to me, if I'm reaching for a neutral palette, I want ease of use. But these shimmers are super beautiful. So we'll see. I definitely need to give this more love. Next, moving on to K, we have the Kypris palette. Got this from BoxyCharm. This palette is just dumb, I think, honestly. These are all just like shimmer shades. That the retail price for this, according to BoxyCharm, was like out of this world crazy. These are some like, I mean, they're like real basic. They're pretty, but they were saying that this palette was like 50 something bucks or something crazy, or more than that. I don't even know, but it's okay. It's just like a little shimmer palette. I also have the Picante palette from Carity. This is a really pretty palette. I like the formula in here. This is like very user-friendly, pretty blendable. I like it. I think the shades are really pretty. They're like creamy, similar to like the Iconic palette. They're a little bit more satiny, but they're very creamy. And I have some from KVD Beauty. This is the Alchemist holographic palette. These are basically just like some inner corner highlighty shades. So they're like really pretty for inner corners. And then the Shade and Light palette is all matte, but I think this is like such a great palette, especially if you were doing like Halloween makeup. I mean, if you were just using this for everyday, fine, but the fact that this is like so focused on contouring and like sculpting the face, I think it's such a unique palette, and I like having this in my collection because I think it's just so unique and helpful, and would be like perfect if you were doing something like very intricate special effects stuff. Like, I don't know, I just think it'd be so cool. And there are those holographic shades swatch out, so pretty. Then I have one from KKW Beauty. This is just the classic palette. It's a great work palette. And I have one from Kylie, which is the Sipping Pretty palette. This is her 21st birthday palette. These were the ones that started it all for me. Started my makeup obsession. I was following the girls on Instagram, and these were the two palettes that like really were calling to me, and I started looking up tutorials on how to use them, and then my obsession with beauty YouTube was born. So thanks to the Kardashians and Jenners. We also have two Clarity Cosmetics palettes. This is the Berry Royal. This one is really beautiful. It reminds me a lot of the Vivid Rose palette, but this one came out first. And then I have So Mermazing, which the shimmers in this palette haunted me for months, and I had to pick this up. So beautiful. And then last for K, I have Kaleidos. I've got a bunch of Kaleidos. We have the Futurism 6 in Lunar Lavender. Really pretty cool tone purple color story. We have Futurism 3 Astro Pink. Did a look with this on my channel, really beautiful. We have Futurism 7 Sashimi City. This is a pretty neutral color story. We have Futurism 1 Sci-Fi Green, which is a beautiful olive green and goldenrod, I guess, color story. And I've heard so many good things about this black. We also have the Futurism 4 palette in VR Neon, which is a really pretty bright color story. I love this pink. I've used this quite a few times. Like, I pulled this whole palette just for that pink. Let's swatch it. Like, I mean, seriously, how pretty is that? And then we have Futurism 5. So I'm missing Futurism 2.
Just kidding. I actually bought the Futurism 2 palette. I found this on Mercari from a lovely queen, also in Pennsylvania, who was kind enough to sell me this beautiful Futurism 2 palette. I am so excited to have this. It is so stunning. So now I have all 7 Futurism palettes. Woohoo!
This one is a pretty, like, Miami Dolphins color story. Turquoise and orange. And then I have the Club Nebula palette, which was Kaleidos and Angelica Nyqvist. And this is a beautiful color story as well. I love the dark mattes and really pretty shimmers in this palette. And the packaging is gorgeous. I actually found one more K to add to the collection of Ks. This is the Emphasize Eye Design palette in Magnify from Kevyn Aucoin. This is a really pretty cool tone palette. It's got a little liquid shimmer shadow here in the bottom, and then a really beautiful array of mattes and shimmers. Really pretty color story. All right, next we have L. So we'll go ahead and start with Lime Crime. I have the Venus Excess in Rose Gold. Super pretty, easy quad for work. Love this. I have the Venus Excess in Silver, another beautiful cool tone quad, perfect for work. And I also have the Solid Gold palette, which is really beautiful. This is the only one I haven't used yet. Then I have the Venus 1, I believe. This one's pretty. It's not one that I reach for often, but I like the formula. This is my favorite Lime Crime palette. This is the Venus 2. This is one I've definitely used several times, and it's really pretty. And then Venus 3 is a pretty pinky purple palette. I also have two from Lovelux Beauty. First I have this quad. This is the Lush Lavender quad. It's got a pretty flaky formula that's like sliding out of the pan. And it's got a pretty satin and some mattes. It's not my favorite, but it's interesting. Then I have this Lovelux palette. This is the Something Gorgeous palette. Really pretty color story, underwhelming formula, unfortunately. I also have these two from Lorac that were in collaboration with Rachel Zoe. This one is the Hollywood Glamour Mini palette. It is so pretty. There's like a little pressed glitter there, and then these beautiful shimmers, some really pretty, easy to use mattes and shimmer formulas. And then this one's really beautiful. It's a little crumbly, but the colors are so gorgeous, and this is like a beautiful like hunter green. But it's like such a unique shadow. I think it's so pretty. These are so soft. That's I think why they're crumbling so much. I'm making a humongous mess as usual. Then I have some from Lunar Beauty. I have Life's a Drag, which is really pretty, half colorful, half neutral palette. I have the Eternal Eclipse palette, which I'm obsessed with. This is so pretty. Lunar Beauty has absolutely my favorite formulas. And then the Moon Spell palette, which is, I think, the prettiest packaging I've ever seen. One of them at least. This is a gorgeous palette as well. And then the last of our L's, we have a Lila B quad, which I'm getting filthy with all this shadow all over myself. It's a really pretty little neutral quad. And her packaging is so heavy, it feels like a stone. We have the collaboration with Lethal Cosmetics and Teresa Is Dead called Lethal Is Dead. Beautiful color story. So much prettier in person and so much more fun to play with than I would have ever imagined. Love this palette. I also have the Laura Lee Los Angeles Nudie Patootie palette. Really pretty neutral, cool tone, some rose gold, pretty shimmers. I really like this one. We have the LA Splash Classic Horror palette, which I think is such a cute palette. Really fun packaging. And it's got a variety of fun mattes. These are just different than the mattes you typically find in palettes. I think they're just really colorful and cool, and I love how grungy this is. And then we have another affordable palette. This is from Lorella Cosmetics. This is the Sweetheart eyeshadow palette. This is like another kind of Valentine's Day theme, but this was really fun to play with. I used this a bunch, and I really liked it. Next, we have the M palettes. So starting with Morphe, I have the Morphe X Manny MUA palette. I have used this palette. I struggled a little bit with the formula, but the look I came out with, I really, really loved. So I think this is okay. My very first Morphe palette ever. This is the Artistry palette in 35V Stunning Vibes. I think this came out like holiday 2019. It's got some pretty blues in it, some neutral tones. And then I have the Jaclyn Hill palette, volume 1. This is the reformulated one. And I have Jaclyn Hill volume 2. I have one MAC palette, which is the Classic Cutie. This is a really pretty purple palette. Definitely need to reach for this one more. I think I pulled this for a Shop My Stash, but didn't get around to using it. I also have a bunch from Melt. I have the Melt stack. This is the Blueprint stack. Super pretty. Blues and browns. I have the Gemini palette. Also gorgeous. The Vita. Beautiful. The Muerte palette. She's in Parties. Smoke Sessions. My John is very puffy. I keep the cover on him because he's just a mess. And there's a little swatch, since it was all over my finger anyway. And we have the Impulsive palette. Very pretty. And then we have my Menagerie palettes. We have the Violet Ink palette. Really pretty cool tone purples. We have the Menagerie X and its Makeup Corner Serenity palette. So beautiful. Whale Song, definitely one of my favorites. Super pretty. Feral palette. These are all just gorgeous. And Pastel Pup, which I have switched out. These two were a black and white matte shade, and I bought these two. This is Turtle Cove and Bunny from Menagerie Single Collection. I just popped them in there. These are all magnetic, so you can switch them out if you want. Should I switch out the battery? We have 4 more M palettes from Marc Jacobs. This first one is in Flamboyant. This one I ordered from Sephora, and my one shade came smushed. It was like exploded all over the place, so I had to sweep it all back in here and repress it. So I have like half a pan of that shade, but the rest of these came in good condition, and I of course love the packaging. I also have this one, which is the Frivolous palette, or Frivolux palette. Frivolux palette. Ooh. And this is like a cool tone purple palette from Marc Jacobs. I also have the Stiletto palette, which is my personal favorite. Lots of pretty cool tones. And then my second favorite one I think would be this one, which is the Extravagance palette. This is so pretty. Next, let's get into N, which is another fun category. Starting with Nomad, I have the Lago de Como palette. And this is a really pretty blue-green color story. I love this deep navy. just think it's so cute. I love that they do all of their palettes based on like their travel adventures. I think that's so sweet. I also have my favorite Nomad palette so far out of the two. This is the Tokyo Harajuku palette. This is a beautiful pastel palette with really interesting shimmers. They're just like really cool, kind of like duochrome-y, topper type. They're just really pretty. I also have a bunch from Nabla. We have the Nabla Dreamy 2 palette. I think this one is so pretty. I created a look I really loved on my channel with this one, but it's like neutral and has some pops of like a periwinkly, purpley blue. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's got 2 of her latex matte formulas, which I think are really neat. Kind of like a creamy matte. We have the Coral Cutie palette. Midnight, this is one of my newest ones. Well, one of 2 of my newest ones. This is the Midnight palette from Nabla. So gorgeous. The other newest one is the Analog palette. It's got really pretty neutrals, some warm shades. This is my favoriteest favorite. This is the Platinum palette. Gorgeous. We have the Wild Berries. This is another favorite. So pretty. We have the Cutie Nudes, which has 3 of the latex formulas, which I love. 3 or 4 of them. Maybe, yeah, 3 of them. These 3 are all the latex formulas, which I love. And then my other newest palette from Nabla is the Side by Side palette. I hemmed and hawed over this one for forever, and I eventually was like, you know what? I freaking love this formula. This palette has been haunting me. I'm getting it. So love, love, love Nabla. And then lastly, for the ends, I have all of my Natasha Denona palettes. I've got her minis, her 5 pans, her middies, and her full size. So starting with her minis, we have Mini Gold. Definitely my favorite of all the mini palettes. I think this is so pretty. We have the Mini Tropics. Beautiful. The Mini Sunset's probably my least favorite. Still a pretty palette, but this is not the best of her formula. I think she's created so many more palettes with a better formula in these shades. This is the Mini Retro palette. It's like pinky greeny gray. This is the Mini Glam. Super pretty. And the Mini Nude, also super pretty. Then I have her 5 pans. This first one was one that was created specifically for BoxyCharm. It's got some shades from a couple different palettes, but it's a really pretty color story. She called this the Peak palette. This is another one she created just for BoxyCharm. It's got some, I think, recycled shades. It's got Ayana, really pretty cool tone color story. This is another one she created exclusively for BoxyCharm. This is the Jubilee palette. So also very pretty. And then we have, this is the Cranberry palette. Gorge. And this is the Coral palette, I think, yeah. Also super gorge. Then going into her midi palettes, I have 3 of them. I have the Sunrise palette. Probably my least favorite color story she's done, but it's still really pretty. We have the Love palette, which is beautiful and fun. And my favorite of the middies is the Glam palette. I love me some cool tones. I'm still thinking about the bronze. I'm still thinking about the midi Zendo. Circo Loco, I think I'm definitely good on. And I'm still looking at that little mini black and white palette she came out with, but I think I'm good because I have Smoke Show from ColourPop. So I don't know. I love her palettes. This is my newest one, the Metropolis palette. I got this for my birthday from Doug. Super pretty. Another birthday palette from Doug from another year was the Gold palette. It's beautiful. The Sunset's probably my least favorite. I'm just not that into warm tones, to be honest with you, but it's still really pretty. The Trio Chrome palette I think is beautiful. Love these greens and purples. And the Biba palette is beautiful neutral palette. I think this one is so pretty. Oops, I forgot one more end. This is NARS Suede Voyager eyeshadow palette. And this is beautiful. It doesn't look that special in the pan, but on the eyes, holy cow, this is such a gorgeous palette. I really, really love it. It's great for like every day, but so impactful and sultry and glamorous. Super pretty. For the letter O, I just have 2 palettes from Ofra. I have this first one that is the Good to Go palette. This one has a really pretty like quad of highlighters. It's got a bronzer and a blush, and then 6 eyeshadow shades. And you can also mix and match, like these all pop out. I have these little grooves that enable you to pop the pan out of the palette and switch things out if you'd like. And then I have the Life's a Draft palette from Samantha March and Ofra. This one has 8 eyeshadows, a bronzer, blush, and highlight. Next, moving into P, we have the Profusion palette. This is the 7 shade multi-finish eyeshadow palette. I don't think this one has a specific name, but it's really pretty. I did declutter all of my other Profusion palettes, but this one I kept because I thought it was like such a beautiful color story, and I really love these shimmers. Especially this one. It's just like so pretty. And it's just like a super easy color story. The mattes are really nice too. Very pigmented. Blend really well. So I've just always hung on to this one because I've actually used it a few times and made quite a divot in this shade. I also have the Persona Identity palette. Just a really pretty neutral color story. I have the Poppy Cosmetics Neon Drip palette. It's a beautiful color story. I love how vibrant this one is. Then I have 2 from Pure. I have the Pure Festival 1 palette, which looks like this. And I have Pure Festival 2, which looks like this. This one I've never touched. I always come back to this color story, and this bottom row just like makes me want to play with it in this pretty coral shade. So we'll see. We'll see what happens to that palette, but 2 from Pure. And then I have a whole array of Pat McGrath. This first one is the Eye Ecstasy Subversive. This is an all shimmer palette. It's really colorful and pretty. We have the Eye Ecstasy Sublime. And this is like a pretty neutral version. This green is my favorite color in this palette. We have the Pat McGrath Mothership Sublime Golden Opulence palette. It's like a pretty rose gold and neutral palette. Super pretty. We have the Pat McGrath Mothership Subliminal Platinum Bronze. This is more of a cool tone version. It's like a little cool tone 6-pan, really pretty. And then we have the Mothership Metamorphosis eyeshadow palette. And that's also really pretty. And I have 2 of her quads. We have the Blitz Astral Quad in Nocturnal Nirvana. This one is all special shades. And then we also have the Blitz Astral Quad in Iconic Illumination. This is like more of a warm tone, neutral, everyday kind of palette, little quad. But it's got all special shades in it as well. Super beautiful. Then we have one of her full-size motherships. This is the first mothership in Subliminal. This is a really pretty cool tone color story. Next we have Mothership 5 Bronze Seduction. And this is like a pretty warm tone, neutral color story. Just really beautiful pops. Color in her special shades over here. And then we have her holiday release from last year, which is the Mothership Mega Celestial Divinity eyeshadow palette, which I think is gorgeous. So many pretty shades in here. Love. And then our last piece are from Pinky Rose. I have the Exotic Peacock. This is a really pretty color story. It's like pinks and purples and greens and blues. I have the Bright Lights palette. This one also has some really pretty tones, lots of fun pops, and there's some pressed glitters as well. And then we have the 80s Baby, which I had to get. This is not my favorite color story, but I was born in the 80s. And this is this beautiful color story. So next let's move into R's. I don't have any Q's, frighteningly so. That's the first letter I've come across I haven't had any for. I'm like, oh my gosh, this collection is insane. So first we have the Hashtag Brights palette from Ruby May. This is a little 8-pan palette that has some colorful shades. Decent formula. It's a nice travel palette. Just don't use it very often, unfortunately. Next, I have one that I really, really like. This is the Rebel Rouge Labs Howlin' For You palette. Really beautiful. This is an indie brand out of South Carolina. So gorge. This is such a beautiful fall palette to me. I just think it's so pretty. And this pressed glitter in the center is very beautiful. It's very multicolored and multi-dimensional. Super duper pretty. And then I have 3 Rowan quads. I don't think I'm gonna pick up the latest one because I think it's a little too similar to the 1111 quad and the warm quad, but this one is the warm quad. These are really pretty creamy textured shadows. Then we have, I think this is the 1111. Yeah, it's the 1111 quad. Super pretty, a little more cool toned and pinky. And then we have the 52 degrees cool quad, which is the first one that I picked up. This one's a little bit more cool toned. Next we have our S palettes. So starting with Suva Beauty, I have the Saffron palette. I did alter this a little bit because there were 2 shades I think in here that I wanted in my magnetic palette that I have with a bunch of ColourPop shadows. So I just put these in from another palette that I depotted. And so this is like a little bit different, but it's still a pretty palette. This is probably my favorite shade, the Star Anise. Definitely like a chunkier shimmer, but that's my preference. I love thick, chunky shimmers. Turn down the lighting a bit. There we go. It's a really pretty color. I also have the Rose Period palette from Suva Beauty. This is a pretty like springtime palette. It's got a lot of pinks and purples and just pretty tones. I also have 3 from Spoiled Lips Cosmetics. I have this first one that's like a gorgeous mauve palette. This is like mauve dreams come true. This one is the Romantic Getaway palette. I also have this one, which is the Girls Night Out palette. This is a really pretty cool tone palette. And then I have this one, which is a pretty rainbow in Tropical Traveler. Super pretty. From Shroud, I have 1 palette. That's the Beaute B-Neck Shroud. It's Freakin' Bats eyeshadow palette. This is beautiful. Another fun, spooktastic color story. And I have 2 from Sydney Grace. I have the collab with Mel Thompson and Sydney Grace. This is the Tiny Marvels palette. I actually just reached for this one yesterday and used these 2 purple shades with a different pigment on my lid. But this is a really beautiful palette. Artwork is gorgeous. And then I also have the Enduring Love palette. I got this on, I guess like the end of last year, but they had repackaged it. It used to be in like a tin package and I have it in the cardboard. Never touched this, never even swatched it. It is beautiful. It's just like, oh, delicious. I waited so long for this. Not waited, but I was trying to get it. It was just out of stock for forever. Finally was so happy to get my hands on it. And I'm happy I got it in this newer packaging because I've heard that folks prefer this one to the tin. Next from Stila, I have this beautiful Happy Hour palette, I want to say, or is this After Hour? Yeah, Happy Hour. This is a gorgeous palette. I am obsessed with these shimmers. They are so pretty. The mattes are nice, they're buildable. I love this palette. And lastly, I have this one from Storybook Cosmetics. This is the Little Briar Rose palette. I think it's really pretty, especially this like bottom row. I always look at that and just think it's beautiful. And it's a really cool packaging too. It looks like a book. Okay, moving on to our teas. First we have Tarte. This one is the Foil Finger Paint in Bahamas. In here we have like 2 cream metallic shadows and a pressed glitter. I thought this was really beautiful. We have the Tarte Sizzle eyeshadow palette, and these are like cream shadows, which is kind of neat, like a cream de matte. And the shimmers are really pretty too. I need to reach for this one a lot more. I also have the Tarte Maneater palette. This was the, I guess, second launch of it that had like a black instead of just a long shimmery white or something, or the matte white, I'm not sure, but I think this is really cute. Great work palette. The Tartelette in Bloom, beautiful packaging, really pretty neutral and cool color story. I have the Tartelette Toasted palette, also beautiful packaging and a really pretty warm color story. I have the Tarteist Pro palette. This one's got a bunch of really pretty mattes and some special shimmers here on the side. And then the Tarteist Pro Remix, which the packaging is really cool. It like changes. It reminds me of the 80s so much. And this one's got mattes and shimmers and then some extra special shimmers here on the side. Everyone loves to crap all over Tarte, but I have absolutely no beef with their eyeshadows. So, to each their own. All right, and then moving into Too Faced, a eyeshadow formula that a lot of people seem to like that I don't really care for too much. This is the Natural Mattes. I've used this palette one time for a BoxyCharm unboxing, but I'd like to try to get some more use out of it. I want to fall in love with this formula. I want to find out why everybody loves this so much. Not this particularly, but Too Faced formula in general. I hear so many people give it compliments. It just tends to fade on my eyelids faster than like other eyeshadows do, and it'll end up like really patchy. So I don't know. I'm gonna continue to play with these because the packaging is really beautiful and I've barely gotten any use out of my Too Faced stuff. But I will give it to Too Faced that their packaging is so beautiful. It makes it very hard to declutter their stuff sometimes. But I do want to try this a little bit more. One I do love from Too Faced is the Just Peachy Mattes. This palette is phenomenal. It is all mattes, but even for a shimmer girl like myself, I love this palette. It has never let me down. It is such good quality. The White Peach got a lot of flack, I think because it just wasn't a deep enough color story, but I think it's still really pretty. I didn't have any problem with the formula in here. Sweet Fig is definitely my favorite shade. This pink Peach Passion is really pretty. And the packaging is beautiful. Then I have this little mini Too Faced Tickled Peach palette. It's okay. And I have the Sparkling Pineapple Eyeshadow palette, which is just really pretty. I love this gold and green and champagne. They're just cool, especially the gold. I remember using my Ulta points when I finally had enough Ulta points to afford this, and I like ran out and grabbed it, and then I've just never really gotten into it. So mainly with my Too Faced stuff, it's that I decluttered the things from Too Faced that I knew I hated. And these are things I'm hoping I can eventually kind of get into because the packaging is so beautiful. And I want to like their formula. I've spent my own money on it, obviously. So yeah. Then we have the Too Faced Gingerbread Spice, which I'd heard so many good things about. I was underwhelmed. And I was also underwhelmed by the Too Faced Chocolate Gold palette. Just a formula thing for me, but the colors are really pretty. Like if I swatch them, they look beautiful, but like when I go to apply them, I just have trouble. So I love these. I wanted them for forever, and when I finally got to try them, I was a little underwhelmed, but they're beautiful packaging and I want to fall in love with this formula. I really just would love to get my money's worth out of all these palettes if possible. And then my last tea brand is Tom Ford. So first I have the Pretty Baby eyeshadow quad. Super beautiful. I just used this the other day in my full face of luxury makeup video. And then I have this little guy. This is the Soleil Neige, which is like a cool tone color story. And I also have this guy. This is the Soleil et Lune, so Sun and Moon palette. For the letter U, we have Urban Decay, starting with the Naked Honey palette. This is my only naked palette from Urban Decay. So pretty. When this first came out, everybody was poo-pooing it. I was in love with it immediately, and then everybody finally got on board. So just because you're a smaller channel doesn't mean you don't know what you're talking about. Just saying. I also love the Urban Decay Born to Run palette. Such a pretty color story. This is, to me, very easy to use. I've heard people complain about these two shades and just that they don't think they're impactful enough, but it depends on what you're going for, really. And then this is another palette that I loved right away. I heard some negative feedback on it from some folks, and then some folks have come around on it and now like it a lot more. I've always really liked this palette. I think these shimmers are so interesting and special and beautiful. They're just gorgeous. I think this is like a beautiful winter palette, beautiful for holiday. Like, oh my gosh. All right, y'all, moving on to V. We are getting there. We've got Viseart. This is the Petite Pro palette in, it doesn't have a name, but it's the Petite Pro 3. And it's got this little pretty color story. I thought this had something like spring in the name, but it's cute. It's like the size of my palm. I also have the Viseart. This is like a neutral palette. I don't know what it's called. I tried looking on the back, but I didn't see anything, but it's just a bunch of neutral mattes. And then from Violet Voss, I have the Creme Brulee palette. Looks like this. I need to get more use out of my Violet Voss palettes because I don't reach for them nearly enough. And this is the Best Life palette. It's got some glitters, and then it's got some colorful mattes and shimmers. For W, I just have one palette. This is from Wayne Goss. This is the Luxury Eyeshadow palette Pearl Moonstone. This is really pretty. Cool tones with this really beautiful blue shimmer. I think that's so pretty. And then I do not have an X or a Y, but I do have a Z. We have the Blanc Fusion from Zoeva. And this is a palette that looks so blah. I have actually used this a couple times, and the funniest thing is that these mattes are so like buildable and like not very like highly pigmented that you almost can't mess up your eye look when you're using this. Honestly, the eye looks I've come out with using this palette have been so beautiful that it's had me keep this palette, even though when I look at it, it doesn't necessarily inspire me. It's just so easy to use, and I really like it. And then I thought I would throw in these guys at the very end. These are all of my indie singles. So in here I have Give Me Glow and JD Glow, a little bit of Natasha Denona, a little bit of Suva Beauty. We have a couple from Clarity Cosmetics, this one, and then we have this palette. And in here I have all my Cleona singles. I have these ones from Kristen Lee. There's Menagerie, the white and black from the Pastel Pup palette. And then these are my Clarity singles, these 4. And then these are from, this is Clarity I think too, this is from Zodiac Cosmetics. And then down here, those are all Luxie. And then in this singles palette, we have all of my Divina singles and then also Terra Moon. And then in this final palette, we have Glaminatrix and Touch of Glam. And I'm just counting each of these big palettes as one palette. So let's go ahead and count up how many I have. I ended up counting up all of my palettes and my total number was 262. Now I did add one palette, the Kaleidos palette, bringing the total up to 263. However, after I finished filming, I did go ahead and declutter 6 palettes, bringing my total down to 257. Still way too many palettes, but I do create beauty content weekly, fairly consistently, and I have for the past 3 years. So I feel pretty good about where my collection's at right now, but as new palettes come out, we'll see how things change. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this video. I love sharing my eyeshadow palette collection with you. I'd love to hear what some of your favorite eyeshadow palettes are in the comments down below. I thank you all so much for being here with me today. I love you all so much, and until the next video,